Welcome to Going In Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and my guest today is a software engineer who cut his teeth as an early member at several different startups in the gaming industry and even working at the tech giant Meta, formerly known as Facebook. And today, he's building an inclusive future for casual gaming. Please welcome the founder of Split Atom Labs, Vernon. But before we hop into the show, I do have a couple quick announcements. First, my book is on the way. Some of you may not know this, but like many of my guests, I have a pretty wild story myself. And I've seen through sharing it over the past several years that it can save lives. So I wrote a memoir. I'm currently working through 3 rounds of editing with my editor, and then it'll be out in the world. And if you want a quick overview of my story, you can go back and listen to the trailer for this show or go to my website at zachtidwell.com to read about it. And while you're there, join my mailing list so you can get updates about the book and any other big announcements that I have moving forward. Finally, the best way to help this show grow outside of word of mouth is to follow, rate, and review it in whatever podcasting app you're using right now. Or if you're on YouTube, just subscribe to the show. And if you know someone you think I should talk to, have them send me an email at contact.goinginblind@gmail.com. All right, Aaron, we're rolling. Thank you. This is, you and I just kind of talked about it before we started recording here. And it sounds like you were trying to figure out the last time that we had talked. And I was similarly, leading up to this, trying to figure out when we actually first made contact. I think. So it's been almost 6.5 years since I shot myself. I think I probably reached out to you 5.5 or 5 years ago because I had found one of your games and found that it was accessible. And I just reached out to kind of see how all that works. Fast forward a couple years, I think I emailed you either after I had already started development on Xanagrams or was about to or had just finished. And then I think we settled on, we probably talked about 2 years ago when you were starting your newest venture here, Split Atom Labs. And I think taking all of that into consideration, you're probably the farthest blast back into the past that I've had in terms of guests on here so far. So I don't know. It's kind of wild.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah. I just looking at my email here. The first email I have from you is from 2020. So yeah,
Wow.
a long time ago.
Yeah. I shot myself at the end of March in 2019. So it was like within that first year. That is so crazy. But I don't know. It's cool that, now I'm going to finally get to pick your brain. So I told you I'm really intrigued by your whole professional history, but do you want to give people, just so they have a little more context that you can give better than I can, what you would say your title is today?
Yep. Yeah. So I'm a co-founder and CEO of Split Atom Labs. And so we're all about building an inclusive future for casual gaming. And our flagship product, Land of Livia, is a mobile, it's on iOS, Mac, and iPad. It's an idle adventure game that you can play throughout your day to give you a sense of reward and progression and narrative to escape your busy life. And it, through years and years of work, it's become one of the most accessible and inclusive mobile games in the world.
Yeah. And I think this is also probably the first episode I'm going to not hold myself back from nerding out with you and getting into developer stuff. So I'm super excited for that. But I know you started literally teaching yourself how to code as a child. And I mean, what was because even, I started teaching myself as an adult. Like, it's not simple. I don't think anyone listening to this is going to assume or has something in their mind that when they hear software development is simple or that it's not highly intellectually intensive. So I'm curious how that wound up happening. And also, like, are your parents very intelligent people? Are they in the software world?
Yeah. So my parents are not in the software world, actually. So my my mum didn't finish high school. She got very close and kind of was unable to get to the last point. And then my actually, sorry, no, other way around. My mum finished high school but didn't go to university. My dad dropped out and went to like a technical school to learn a trade. But so I didn't really kind of get any of the software development or like mathematical side of things from them. But what I did do is get the hustle and the startup energy. So my dad started his own business when I was young. He has an optical store. He sells glasses and frames to people. And he's just super passionate about that. My mum helped out with the business as well, and they grew it into a quite a successful thing. And so I definitely saw that grind that he went through and that will to create something. And so when I talk about like development more broadly, I think it's really about creation, right? It's about creating something that didn't exist before. And I think no matter what your medium is, that's a hard effort. That's probably the hardest thing to go through is pushing through the self-doubt, pushing through the all the reasons you shouldn't do this, all the reasons you should give up and just keep on going. And I've just always had that push, that urge, that ambition from a very young age. Even through to like the sand pit, like wanting to create the best sandcastle, right? Like, pushing it further than most other people would, most other maybe even sensible people would. But then I kind of was obsessed with games. I was playing the original Nintendo system as a very young kid. And parents would be saying, you should go outside and play. I'm like, no, like why should I do that? Like, well, that thing's gonna rot your brain, et cetera, et cetera. It's like more fool them, right? Like I managed to make a career out of it. Um, but then yeah, I found that like I gravitated towards the coding aspect. I was good at thinking in that logical way. And then so I picked up a C++ textbook at the ripe old age of 12 and just was able to just kind of get through it slowly and just start learning how to code myself.
I hope you realize that is absolutely insane. I think everyone that hears that is also going to think that. But was this because how old are you now?
I am 39 now.
Okay, so I mean you're only 10 years older than I am. So was this still kind of DOS like command line stuff when you were getting started? Or was there actually
Um,
some GUI going on?
there was GUIs.
Okay.
I think my university was all training was all Linux based, text based only for the most part. But when I was coding, I started off making text based stuff because it was easier to do, and I could focus on like the fundamentals of the language. Um, but I definitely feel like programming in general has gotten much easier over the last 15 years. Like C++ is, especially at that time, the more modern standards of C++ are a little bit friendlier, but early on, like it's pretty brutal. There's a lot of like ways to. I think that the common thing is the saying is C allows you to shoot yourself in the foot. C++ allows you to blow your whole leg off.
And, yeah, I guess so. I've only tinkered, and I say tinker, I'm very solid in Swift, very solid in TypeScript at this point. Like those are the only languages that I've used, but I've heard, and I'm curious about C++, but because none of the game engines are accessible, I don't have any other real uses for it, right? So
Yep.
like, so I haven't gotten to tinker with it, but I know like garbage collection isn't a thing in that language. So as a 12-year-old
No.
on top of everything, and like I know for me when I was first learning, and I don't know how much of that was visually not being able to see what my code is doing, when you update state in the UI and I can't see the UI refresh or something like I don't know. I had a hard time wrapping my head around that. And as a 12-year-old to have that on top of trying to manage memory leaks and all these other things that is just freaking mind blowing. But when you were kind of talking about this drive and that
Yep.
part inside of you that says that you have to be the best with everything, I made me curious. Do you have an older brother?
I do not. I am the oldest,
Oh,
actually.
okay. When I heard that, I was like, he had to have been getting his ass kicked by an older brother this whole time. And he's like, I'll show you. But uh well, then I guess my theories kind of shot down there. But that seems like that wasn't necessarily out of character for you to get into something like that, given I know when you went to college, was it theoretical mathematics is what you ended up going to college for?
Yeah, so I ended up in a double degree. At that time, software engineering was not as popular as it is now. Like it was much more of a niche thing. And so even though I wanted to make games, like I knew I wanted to be a game developer, I wanted to have a formal background because like I'd excelled through school, and like I didn't want to take a step back academically too early, and then like limit my, long-term potential. So I did the software engineering degree, and I'm like, oh, this is actually going to be like I'd learned a lot of the stuff, right? Like I already learned like the first year and a half of the syllabus. So I wanted a bit of an extra challenge, and I'd always been really good at maths and physics. So I'm like, yeah, mathematical physics. Let's go and do that. Like that seems relevant to some of the stuff in games. Unfortunately, it started like beyond the second year, before halfway through the second year, it started getting so theoretical that I'm just like, this is not relevant, and it's just gonna slow me down from getting into the industry. So I stopped it.
Did it interest you, or was it literally just the fact that that didn't apply, that wouldn't serve you in the software world that drove you away from it?
Yeah, good question. Um, the answer is interesting. I think that like um, it started getting into areas where I felt there was no right or wrong answers, right? Like everyone's guessing. Like, we don't know the full extent of quantum mechanics. We don't know the some of the other I forget the other stuff we were studying, but it's very, very theoretical, very cutting edge, and there were no right or wrong answers, and that bothered me. I wanted to
Oh,
know, am I right or am I wrong? And then I realized that, oh, actually, researching that future stuff, that doesn't suit my skill sets and my interests. It's like I want to be able to create with what we have today. And not to say that I'm not intellectually interested in that other stuff, right? And I still read, about like the latest discoveries and all that kind of stuff, but I want stuff that I can build and ship within the next, 1 to 10 years.
yeah. And so with those theories, it sounds like at the end of the day, because there's no right or wrong answers because they are just theories and they can't be tested yet. Is that
That's right.
right? Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does kind of seem like that would take the wind out of the sails in terms of the funness of it. Like you don't
Yeah.
get to see if any of that toiling was actually productive in the
I
sense
mean,
of,
back when I was at university, they were building, a quantum mechanics in like the basement, and like they could only test it at times when like the trams weren't running up and down the street because it would mess with the equipment. They're still building it, right? Like they're getting closer. Like the quantum mechanics and quantum computing is getting very close now. But yeah, like I just didn't have that staying power to be doing that and just that for that many years.
wow. Have you, because that was, and I would say it's been a couple of years since I've even read into this. So I'm sure there's probably a lot more information out there for it and about it now. But it's, when I think I first heard of quantum computing around the time that I was learning how to code. So I had the thought of, all right, how relevant is me learning to code on a classical computer with with quantum computers coming? And I did more
Yeah.
research and realized that quantum computers, in the sense that they will be accessible to people like me, is still a long way off. But I did start looking into what it would look like to develop software for a quantum computer, and you start dealing with
Yeah.
superposition and all that stuff. And it was
Yes.
just, I mean, and that's another thing I get, because it comes up a lot, especially right now with AI. And obviously, when I say AI, I'm talking about LLMs kind of being in the zeitgeist with everything, because that's taken over the term of AI, even though that's not really truly what it means, in terms of it just being LLMs. But quantum computing, typically, when it's non-technical people, quantum computing gets lumped in with that, with people try and pair like the runaway of LLMs into AGI, coupling with quantum computers. And well, quantum computers are going to be able to break all of our encryption and all, and
Yeah.
you know, basically no time. And but I don't think people don't understand that, like, those don't equate. They're not operating on the same paradigms, and they're not even possible. That it's just, I don't, it's such, that's like a thing when I hear someone like you, like I don't have the horsepower in my brain to be in a field like that or be doing math like that in college. But it, like, part of me is like, how did some part of you not always pull you back to that? It's just, but I think it's that creative spark that you talked about, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
It is, and it's about finding that sweet spot between the amount of innovation that you can work on and get into the hands of real people, in a feasible timeline, right? Like I said, like I'm always kind of that 1 to 10 years. Actually, like most recently at Meta, I was kind of more towards the 10 years in the future, and I was a little bit uncomfortable with that. And so now, like I've pared it back down to like the 1 to 5 range. And it just is because you need that feedback. You need that feedback loop to keep you sustained. The idea that like people will actually be using this, they will be giving real feedback. Um, and so, but as a result of that, it does mean throughout your career, you have to always be, staying on top and jumping to the next wave. And I certainly, like, as I'm getting older, it's becoming more tiring doing that. And you build up a lot of skepticism over the years of like the waves that, the waves that went well, the waves that didn't go well. And like, AI, you bring up AI is like AI is going better than other waves in the past, but I still believe it's just a wave. The current phase is just a wave. Like it's going to curve down and then it's going to come back in a stronger way later on. But like I don't buy into the kind of the hype cycle
Yeah.
that everyone kind of tends to.
I'm in a similar position, especially, and it's part of the problem is algorithms here. Like I think a lot of the content out there, especially people talk about vibe coding and like
Yeah.
Claude code and all these things. I think a lot of that content that gets put out is AI generated. I
Hmm.
believe that because anyone
Yeah.
who actually knows how to code, who sits down with one of those things, like if you ask it to do anything outside of, hey, turn this interface into a class or whatever, or add getters and setters to this class, it it messes that stuff up, and it's simple stuff. And when you start getting
Yeah.
into security considerations, good luck. Like, or
Oh
even
yeah.
something as
Yeah.
simple as like truly managing state. And I don't, it's hard because it's again, you get non-technical people who don't actually, I think they see a lot of that content and that's carrying the hype.
Hmm.
And I wonder like how much of that is to inflate the stocks of these companies that are
Oh
out
yeah.
there pushing the edge.
It's
Yeah,
it's a lot of it, and I can almost guarantee that a lot of the executives that talk about it, they know that they're hyping it up beyond what's actually feasible now versus and also in the near future. Um, but I think the biggest challenge to me is that like we've lost a lot of nuance in public discourse. So like it's a complex topic. There is nuance to it, right? So like vibe coding is an example. I, as a very senior engineer, I vibe coded my websites for Land of Livia and Split Atom Labs. I built each website in 1 day. Previously, that would have taken me 1 to 2 weeks per website. So I got a huge gain out of that. But why did I get that gain? Because I'm a senior engineer that can tell when the AI is spitting out shit and I need to restart it. I need to like change approach. It's because I have all that foundation that allows me to then move that fast, right? So yes, like super powerful, and like it's my daily workflow. I use it multiple times a day. Um, but also like in the last few months, it's written some of the worst bugs that I've had to fix, and I didn't catch them for a month or two because they're subtle. So the big thing I worry about is like that lack of nuance. Is like yes, it's going to accelerate us, but like this preemptive thing of like, okay, we're going to get rid of all of our junior and mid-level engineers. I mean, I think that's fraught with danger. Like, where are the senior engineers going to come from?
exactly. That's not logical, right? You don't just skip that step. And like you said, the reason that was possible for you to vibe code those things is because you have the skills. Because, I've thought about this a lot. Yes, they can crank out code, but you know that it's going to be erroneous in a lot of ways. It's some of them overt and some of them not. And then it becomes, okay, do I want to write the code or do I want to read the code? Like for me, I get a better grasp of just writing things from scratch than I know it in and out, as opposed to going through and reading 1,000 lines of code that this computer spit out and I know is going to be broken.
Yep.
I think that also sucks a lot of the fun out of it. I've
Yeah.
I don't know, right? Like again, it's that creative thing. And I thought that was interesting. I think you're the only, I guess you're the, I've had, I think one or two other developers on here, but we didn't talk about development so much because that's not like their
Hmm.
primary thing. And so you're the first person that I've spoken with that's also touched on programming being this creative outlet because that's really, I feel Yeah, I've gotten addicted to it, but I think a lot of it was
Mm,
scratching that, I was an artist when I could see, and I think it
yes.
has scratched that itch for me where it is still a blank
Yeah.
canvas. And it,
So
go ahead.
one of my pet peeves right now, and I mean, it's pet peeve from my personal perspective. I respect both sides of the dialogue, but there's been a very strong pushback from artists on the use of AI. And basically any use of AI art is heavily berated online and in products. And I understand the motivation behind it, that artists have been marginalized for most of history, and they're usually the first thing to get cut in terms of like spending and investment. But on the flip side, we don't have that pushback from the development perspective. Even though I see it, and you see it as a creative outlet and a creative pursuit. And the same backlash has not been had on like getting rid of all these junior people from learning this creative pursuit. So like I see kind of like a weird imbalance there. Um, but I guess what is interesting about it though is that most developers you'll talk to, they've embraced it in some way, right? They know that it's the future and they know that it's going to be inescapable. So it's like, well, let's learn how to use it in the best way possible. And I think that's a great thing that developers, programmers have, is that mentality of always trying to like upgrade tools and build things in the best way possible.
Yeah, and you've touched on it already, but it is being in this field is constant learning. You have to
Yes.
you're constantly reading more articles and more documentation and learning about new frameworks or new libraries. And you have to, otherwise you will stagnate and
Yeah.
all of your momentum will be lost. And
Well,
it's,
I think you know this, and but I don't think the mainstream knows, is even just having your Xanagrams app up there. Like even if you're not doing active development, it's hard to maintain it. You've got to learn all the new OSs that come out. You've got to update it. That doesn't come for free. And so when people push back against the price of apps or the free whether apps are free or paid, they don't understand it. Like this is ongoing cost to maintain and just have an app out there.
it's constant outside of the cost that you pay to be on the platforms. I mean,
Oh yes.
I took Xanagrams down because I had too much on my plate with my book and this new
Mm,
company that I've been working on for the past year and a half. But I recently, I flew to Costa Rica and was down there for a week just to have a break from everything. And I was
yep.
like, okay, I'm going to get back to game development on this. I've got 10 hours of flights back and forth. So I'm gonna I'm gonna break into games here for a little bit. And so I started working on Xanagrams again and to migrate it over. And I had used Swift's codable protocols for everything. And, some of that's kind of hard coding, the encoding, the decoding with the observable objects and stuff like that. But I started migrating over to
Yep.
Swift data. And even that, you're like, gosh, dude, like it's been so much buggier than it should be because Swift data is still new, and even though all this documentation's out, and Apple has released this as a product as part of the SDK, like it's not fully fleshed out yet, and it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure when I re-release Anagrams, there's going to be a mess with all the Swift data stuff now being tied into everything. But
Yeah.
and that's I'm curious. And I promise I'm going to start moving towards your projects here. But as we move towards Land of Livia and then the, I guess you starting Split Atom Labs, I do want to be able to kind of step through more of your career. Specifically, you dove in, and it looks like several times have dove in specifically into the startup world, which
Yes.
is a bold move. I know obviously now you're running your own startup, but before as we step into, because what was it, Two Bowls was the first company that you got involved with, is that
That's
correct?
right. Yep.
Before we get into that, can you try and explain, just to give people a little context as to what a startup is, and then try and give people some understanding as to what the risk versus reward is as a developer in an early stage
Mm.
startup like that, and why I'm saying, because that's why it's so interesting to me is you've taken these huge risks throughout your career, and it's just that takes huge balls.
Yeah, I've been told that a few times, and it's interesting because at the time it never seems like a risk to me. It seems like that it was just the obvious choice. It was the thing that I had to do. Once I think it's that compulsion thing, right? Like I had to do these things. Like I didn't really have another option. Um, but to talk in terms of a startup is a high risk venture. That typically starts with an idea and a few people to execute it that form a founding team, and they have either their own money or work for free, and then either build it up with revenue or they raise money. And if you raise money, then you're setting expectations on what your product will be and how it will grow. And typically, then you need to deliver that milestone in order to unlock the next round of funding. And then you keep going until the point in which you get, able to go public or be acquired. Um, I it actually the origins of startups and the origin of like companies for high risk ventures go all the way back to ship trading missions, back in the old days when people wanted to fund like explorations to find new products in other lands. But there was a high chance that that would fail and that people didn't want to be personally accountable for it. So they created the idea of a company that people could get together and fund. And then if the company, went under, nobody was kind of personally liable.
And that was
And
as the British were expanding the empire,
that's
correct?
right.
Which is
Yes.
so
Yeah.
crazy.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, like we're expanding like the digital empire now. Like that's the big focus is like these digital products because that's where a lot of the innovation is. But there's also been things in clean tech and space exploration or other areas where startups have been useful vehicles. So uh, when you join a startup, um, I think there's a lot of like nowadays there's a lot of mythology around it. Startup Silicon Valley, the TV show, you see successful startups like Facebook and Apple. But like they're the outliers, right? So there is a real survivor bias that happens in the media. Is like you hear about the ones that are successful, but the vast majority fail and they fail spectacularly, in usually pretty emotional ways. And so when you join them, like you need to have the understanding that like this is likely going to fail. You get paid below market rates generally, unless you're in a really hot area and in a hot like geographical location like Silicon Valley. And so you earn less money, but then you get this like lottery ticket. That's the way I like to explain to people. It's not guaranteed money, but there's a chance that you might make a lot of money sometime in the future. And that is your equity, in stock or stock options, and they usually vest over time to make sure that you stay at the company and continue to deliver value. But they're very complicated, and most people early in their career don't really understand like all the ways that you can lose with stock options. With when funding rounds come in, you can get diluted. You can lose them if you quit too early. They can have huge tax ramifications, so they're quite complex. So that's why I like to see it as that kind of lottery ticket. Um, and and yeah, and then you have to generally deal with founders that are very passionate. They're like easy to get behind, but they're also maybe they don't have the full skill set. I mean, nobody really has the full skill set because you don't know really what you're doing to begin with. And so there are gaps that are hard to fill in terms of expertise. And emotions can get high in a lot of situations. So they're an intense situation.
And they are, like you touched on it, that that culture, at least I think for developers and I think people who have that entrepreneurial curiosity, at least they are romanticized, right?
Yes.
Because when they do, the ones that have paid off that are known out there are just, I mean, it's almost hard to grasp
Yeah.
how incredible they've become. Like Google, you were talking about the lottery ticket thing. I think when Google went
Mm-hmm.
public, I believe over 1,000 of their employees became millionaires overnight.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
classic story of an artist that worked for Facebook early on to do like a mural, like a art piece that was paid in stock that became a millionaire
Oh my
when
gosh.
they went public.
Yeah. And it's, I think part of it's, what comes with that. If you're on the inside, you're there during the hustle culture, and
Hmm.
it is a wild west there because people don't know what they're doing, and it's going to be long hours, and there's going to be a lot of pain there, and it is, I mean, there's that huge risk, and I think I can understand it. I can definitely understand it. Like you as a young man and first getting into the world and being like, yeah, I'm going to go to these startups, but especially, you've done it repeatedly. And so that I think it's that you've continued to dip your toes back into it where I'm like, man, and especially now, you have a family and you're doing it too. And
Yes.
it's so admirable to me. I just, again, the cojones that it takes to do that stuff.
S-
But
s- So I
oh,
think like the flip side, like the positive side of it for sure is that um you don't get pigeonholed, right? So there's no one telling you that you can't try something or you can't build a skill set that you don't have. So it's incredible for like building that diverse set of skills. And so that's what I did from an early point is like I tried to do a bunch of things and I got better at them. And I like that freedom. And but then it became that skill is not as easily transferred to regular corporate jobs because there you typically are hired for your depth, and so that is what. Hang on a second, I need to deal with a crying child. I'll be back in a
yeah,
second.
you're good. Okay. And we're back. It sounds like the crisis is averted on your end. And
Yeah,
we were just starting to talk about the startup stuff, but how, and I think we were, oh, you were specifically talking about, as a startup founder, you get to be wide and broad and
yeah,
have
yeah,
all of these
yeah.
knowledgeable areas, but inside of a company, you're hired because of a narrow scope of expertise.
That's right. Yeah, and so I think the big uh just to give some kind of like wider background on like my journey is like I've always kind of known that I think and act a bit different to most people. And so I actually like last year I ended up going to get my neurodivergent kind of diagnosis done. And it turns out like I have autism and ADHD. And I think that like that combination has definitely fueled a lot of the kind of opportunities that I pursue, right? Like I don't like to be, put into a single box and only do one thing. I like that freedom to jump around. And then, and I like the freedom to like, if I get really passionate about something, is to pursue it, really deeply, which is like what I've done with the accessible gaming now. And so when I talk about and the balls to do it is like from my perspective, I didn't really have another choice. This was the space where I felt that I could be effective. And so that's just kind of what I kept doing.
Sometimes a touch of the tism goes a long way. Uh,
Exactly.
I
I mean,
think
I've
for
definitely worked with a lot of people in my time as a manager of software developers. I think that there's just a huge prevalence of neurodivergency in that field for sure.
Yeah, and it's obviously I don't have experience in the real world with any of this stuff, so I haven't seen any of that, and that's part of the reason I'm so curious to get into this progression. So because part of it, the story of Two Bulls, real especially with like the multiple iterations of you being there is very interesting to me. But
Yeah.
then working as a game developer at a big studio and eventually at just a mega corporation. So what? Because it's I knowing. I'm curious to know what it's like being in the middle of such a machine like that. And it's
Oh yeah.
part of it's also the fact that you stepped into more of a management role, which is
Hmm.
another thing that's to me is very intriguing because it's really with any profession as you start to rise, right? Like at the end of the day, if you want to keep progressing, you will raise or reach the level of management at some point and then be pulled away from
Hmm.
the thing that brought you there and that really got your fire going in the first place. And so I guess when you first got into Two Bulls, you're junior developer straight out of college?
No, I joined a little bit further on. I had some, some other small company. Actually, I did have some startup stuff before then. I tried the game development companies. Um, well, yeah, I mean, the first startup that I joined out of college actually was the final year of my university. We did a project with them for like a year, and so like the company already knew me, and I developed some good software for them. And so my first job out of college was with a game studio that I got treated very poorly at. I mean, everyone got treated very poorly at it. The industry is very well known for that. And then so I quit to like join that startup that I already had that existing relationship with. Um, but like I remember very clearly, I didn't know much about startups at that point in time, but there came a time when there was an email sent around the office. It's probably about 30 people, I think, in the company or something, and there was two different times set out for the email. Like most people got an email saying that there was a meeting at 4:30, and then I got an email saying there was a meeting at 5. Everybody that showed up to the 4:30 meeting was fired. The people at 5 were staying, and there was only a handful of us.
No
And
way.
this is my first job. Like I'm a young person. I'm like, holy crap, what the hell just happened? um, and so like that gave me that reality of like, you better be building something that people want and that is, resonating with the market. Otherwise, you're going to run out of cash. Um, but anyway, I digress. So, um, by the time I joined Two Balls, I joined as a lead developer. So, we had a small group of engineers and I was kind of leading. And so for those that don't know, lead developer is, you probably spend about 70% of your time doing individual development and 30% of your time like leading and mentoring and directing other people and projects. And then as the company grew, I then moved into like a director of software engineering role. And then eventually, once the company got to, I think, 35, 40 people or something, into the CTO role, which is something that I'd aspired to. And by the time you get to a CTO role, your thinking needs to be much more about strategy. Like how do you like continue to evolve the technical practices of the company to stay relevant and provide a better service? And then also a lot of sales, right? Like you need to be front and center in the deals that are being made to convince people to, trust the technical expertise of your company.
And so, in that capacity, you are the bridge between your developers and the client in terms of
Yes,
speaking to your potential and what the capabilities are of your tools.
that's right. And I
Okay.
liked to do that. I like to be able to, grow engineers and empower them to do their best work. And to, there's usually, I mean, maybe less so now, but there used to be a lot of friction between business folks and engineers. They, water and oil, to a certain degree. And I was very good at bridging that gap. And that's where I found my sweet spot of like, I could talk the business speak, I could talk the sales pitch, which, I think I got from my dad. That's the big strength that I
Mm.
got there from him running his own business,
Yeah.
and being a salesman for many years. And then I could do the hard engineering as well. And so, when you can flip it in those meetings and you can be talking the business and the sales speak, and then, someone chimes in with a really technical question and you bat it out of the park, that's usually like, okay, we just won that client.
Yeah, that part of it, I could see. I, c- I could like that made me smile a little bit because I could picture like, okay, you're like, yeah, I'm good. Like it's another form of puzzle, right? Like the coding is always a constantly evolving logic puzzle.
Yep.
But if you're kind of on the leading edge of interfacing between your own capabilities and then trying to make someone else understand it to the point where they believe that they need to pay you money for your services, like that is, yeah, it just that sounds, I've never heard it broken down like that before, and I don't know. I think that was perfect. So as in you had aspired to that just because you wanted to get that experience specifically, or is it just because like was your plan to stay with that company long term? What were you trying to do with that?
Good question. I mean, I think there are two parts. Like one, I really strongly believed in what we were doing as a business. We had a great group of people, which is why, like, even when I left that company, I came back to it years later. I have a very strong connection to that group of people. But I think in terms of the move to management and strategy in business, there are two reasons. One, and they're kind of related. The first is it is the most obvious way to scale your impact. So when your drive is creation, there's only so much you can create yourself. But if you have a team of 30 engineers, you can create a lot more. And so that was just a natural progression for me of like, I want to create bigger and in more interesting things. And so I need more people to work with. I think that's a little bit changed nowadays, and you can do a lot more with a smaller team, which is great. But then the other driving factor was that I think that I just always wanted to start my own company. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, when I was going to do it. But given that influence from my parents, like I saw the lifestyle that enabled, and I wanted to push for that.
Yeah, and I'm curious because I know personally how I think of that lifestyle, right? Including the grind of it all. Like that to me,
Mhm.
that grind in and of itself is attractive to me. Is that part of it for you too? Like because it is, you've fucking earned it, right? Like that is I think that is what about that speaks to me. Is it that way for you?
Um, I mean, I think I like working, right?
Yeah.
I feel disoriented if I'm not doing something productive. So I think
Yeah.
that is the case. I don't know, like um yeah, I don't think I can really pinpoint exactly what is the reason why I am so driven towards it. It's hard to articulate.
As you like kind of sticking along that same line and with as you moved into the managerial side of things, because we've touched a couple times on how if you're not coding and continuing, like making a point to push yourself and constantly move into other areas of coding, you
Mm.
will stagnate. As a manager, how did you do that? Were you still working on side projects, or is it just kind of all of your time was consumed and you had to relearn that as you moved on to other things, or what?
Um, it varies. So at Two Bulls, I generally always spend at least 20% of my time um, working on like innovative, cutting edge projects. And like I would contribute to them personally. I would also have like, my lieutenants essentially that I would, catch up with very regularly to understand like, how's it going? Like, what are the challenges? How can I help? So that helped. And then from 2014 onwards, I was building Land of Livia on the side as well. So that kept my iOS knowledge, always at the forefront, which is really always been for a very long time, since like 2010, been my bread and butter. Like that's the area that I know very, very well, and I can speak to authoritatively. Um, at Meta, it was much harder. Like I didn't have any I didn't have an ability to contribute to the code or to really the technical architecture at all. So I moved much more into like a product management type of obviously I was doing the people management as well, but then I would lean into the product management side of things.
Was that from day one where like not even access to the code base?
Um, like I mean I had access to the code base and I like learned how to contribute to it, but it just like I didn't feel
Okay.
like I could have an impact doing that.
Okay.
Like there are much you want to talk about like imposter syndrome, like some of these big companies, like the level of skill in those. I mean, it's just insane how talented some of these people are. Like we talk about 10x engineers, and I've always considered myself like a 10x engineer. But like if I'm 10x, then these people are 100x. And I really believe that. And I managed a few of them that were just truly exceptional. It's like, okay, I can't add more value to them, but I can help them enable them to do their best job and make sure that what they're working on aligns with business priorities. That's where I spent my time.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's like the okay, if you made it to play D1 college football, obviously you were a stud at your high school. But then when you're there, everyone else was a stud at their high school too. So you don't stand out.
Absolutely.
If you're able to make it to the
Yep.
pros, being Meta or Google or something like that, like that was every stud from a D1 college team. And it's just, yeah, how would you not feel imposter syndrome there? Like
Yep.
it's,
Yep.
And I, if I remember correctly, you got offers from you basically had to choose between Meta and Google before you went to Meta, right?
I did. I was very lucky. You know, there's actually like a pretty well documented process. I don't know if it still works now, but at the time, there's a very pretty documented process you could go through to like train yourself up for these interviews so that you could do very well. There's like a book, Cracking the Coding Interview, that you can read and practice. And so, like, I studied that for like every weekend for the few months leading up to it. Even though like I was already like CTO of a 100-person company, like I still did all that practice. And honestly, I think like that's the that's part of the test, honestly, is like who are the people that are going to go and do that on the weekends before for
Yeah.
3 months leading up, right? That's the kind of people that they want to hire. So yeah, I was able to get offers from both, and I liked the. I mean, Meta had a better compensation package, but more importantly, they allowed more freedom in terms of like team choice, and the kinds of projects that I could work on.
I'm glad that was going to be my next question was like, how do you pick between the two? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they're as a developer, they're like both dream jobs, right? Outside of
Yep.
obviously, yes, I think you obviously have a mind for game development. So working at face value, everyone would think that working at like a AAA game studio would be the answer. But like you've already touched on, the culture and of those environments tends to be horrible for developers because it is more of a that is a career based in passion as
That's
opposed
right.
to
Exactly.
working at the mega corporations, even though there is a ton of money flowing through those studios. But so, and at that point, because when did you join Meta?
2019.
Okay, so like by that point, because I mean, was React Native they're out in the world by then and fully
Yeah,
kind
I
of
think
being
so.
adopted? Okay, and so because I know you started working, was it was on like their business suite? Is that correct?
Yeah. So, I had Land of Livia like launched, and I gotten a fair amount of traction by using Facebook ads. I thought the platform was great, like, and it really allowed small businesses to, find their audience and grow in a much more cost effective way than traditional advertising. So I was, you know, intrigued by that. I wanted to learn more about how that system worked and the value that it could deliver. And so I ended up working in a team uh, focused on like how to better serve small businesses and creators. And so we did this huge migration project for Facebook pages that took many years. It had many technical and process challenges. And yeah, I got to learn, basically about every product across the Meta suite.
The migration part of that sounds absolutely miserable. I mean, obviously, I've only refactored projects that are thousands of lines of code, not tens and hundreds and millions of lines of code. Like
Yeah,
that's
the scale
disgusting.
is insane. I think that like and you'd probably get the same answer from a lot of people that have worked at Meta. Is what's the biggest thing I learned from Meta is that is the scale and how to deal with things of that scale, and the fact that like people in general, humans in general, are not good at at those types of scales. Like you can't intuitively think about them. Like stuff can get really hard, really fast. It can get intractable, and you need to use different approaches in order to solve at that scale.
Well, and it's hard for me to fathom even like how you keep up with documentation for that, right? Like how it just seems there's too many points that seem like they can fall out of sync. Like you're saying, it is just an incomprehensible amount of code there, and these especially being able to link the different systems together in a way that doesn't make it so that changes in one are entirely catastrophic to the other. And it's again, that's part of why this is so interesting to me. Like architecturally, there was it a monolithic code base, or like I know
It was,
Amazon.
yeah,
Okay, so I know like Amazon. I guess Bezos at some point in the past like made a huge push to basically make every aspect of their code bases like their own APIs and all be kind of like basically little containers of the system. But I've
yeah.
also, do you ever, I know you're probably just stupidly busy with Split Atom, but it's Do you ever listen to podcasts? Like I really enjoy Lex Friedman's podcast. Do you know who that is?
Yeah. I see clips of it.
Okay.
Like I'm unfortunately in the kind of the shorts and reels space for
Yeah.
like that's the media that I end up consuming, which I hate. I wish I had like the attention span for podcasts, but yeah, I'm not actively listening to them.
He recently had the founder of Ruby on Rails on, and that guy, I mean,
Mm.
if you go listening to the guy talk is rough. He's
J
very like,
Jason Fried or Fried, right? Is
I
that him?
think so, but it just, the way he talk, he's just very energetic, and it almost sounds like he's like yelling at you the whole time while he's talking. But he was
Ah,
talking about the different, yeah, basically the monolithic code base versus like that API kind of approach. And it was just hearing people who have been in it, like him or like you, and especially, he's been the base of something like that is,
yeah.
again, without having the insider perspective, it's very, very intriguing to me. But this is something I was curious about in general. Now that we're talking about, I'm even more specifically because know now that Land of Livia was already out by the time that you were working at Meta. Like Meta's accessibility, specifically in the Facebook apps, is pretty freaking terrible. Like, did
Yes.
you working there at that time? Obviously, you already had the interest in accessibility to some degree. I'm. Were you aware that Facebook's accessibility was that bad?
I was.
Okay.
I was, and it was difficult to deal with. I had to basically just put it out of my mind as like, that's, I talked earlier about like startups and the ability to like have an impact, where you want. And like, even though that's technically true at Meta, there would have been a lot of challenges with me trying to affect change there. It's just too big of a problem for me to try and take on. Now, I think it is important to say that there's a lot of smart accessibility people at that company. That is not the challenge, right? The challenge is that to affect change at the scale that's needed for accessibility is a very challenging problem. And it's there's just a lot of competing priorities, and there's a lot of misunderstanding of the value of accessibility. Um, and so like that's the challenge there. In my second part of my role, like that I moved to at Meta, I was leading the AR gaming team for the new Orion headset that they were working on. You might see pictures of Zuck with the glasses on playing like a Pong game.
Yeah.
That was my team that built that. And um, that's when it really kind of hit home. Like I could see so many great accessibility features for a lot of their wearables, like use cases. And people were, um, a lot of earlier on, like struggling to find like, what are the use cases for these devices? And they seem to be missing the kind of the obvious thing. I mean, there were people talking about it, but it was not getting traction. Um, that was definitely like one of the motivations for me to leave was that. Like I saw that, I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. It's frustrating me. I feel like it can have a better impact outside the company. Now, thankfully, Meta has taken great steps in the meantime, right? With the Meta Ray-Ban, and
Yes.
the accessibility features on that, and the integration with Be My Eyes, which is all excellent. So I'm very thankful that they've taken that step. Actually, one of my former design partners heads up the vision accessibility design team, and I caught up with him
Oh,
recently while I was over in the Valley.
do you think he'd be willing to talk with me?
He might. He might.
Okay.
I can try. Yeah.
Okay. I would
I think
definitely,
it might be challenging just from like, Meta is pretty strict on like, who can talk to who about what,
that makes
but I
sense.
can check.
Okay. And before we move on here, I realized, and I should have prefaced this before I brought up the accessibility stuff. I'm going to lay this out for people listening when we're talking about accessibility here. So this is specifically developers can take steps to make their software accessible to different access technologies. So like me being completely blind, I use screen reading software. That's how I get my podcast set up. That's how I've written my book. When I write code, my computer's reading things aloud to me. All of that is only possible because the software that I'm accessing has been developed in such a way that leaves important data available for my screen reader to access. But there's other access technologies like magnification software and voice control software for people who are paralyzed or who are amputees or just have other dexterity issues or brain injuries. And that there's there's an entire world of these assistive technologies that can be incredibly life-changing for people, given that developers take the right steps when developing their software. And so that's what we're talking about here. And that's like, yeah, I can't believe I didn't think to bring that up before I dove into that. But, and now with all of that out there, I want to take a one step back before we move forward here. Because Land of Livia was already out, how did that first come about, and specifically on the accessibility side? Because like
Yep.
I specifically remember when I was in college after I got out of the Marines, I was working on a paper, I think in Google Docs, and there were accessibility settings, and there was something to do with some sort of setting that indicated blind people using computers. And I was like, how fucking stupid is this? Like, blind people can't use computers. And then, of course, you know, a couple months later, I'm blind. But like, how did that get into your awareness even?
Yep. Yep. So I started building Landolier in 2014. I was just coming out of a failed startup. I was living in New York City for the first time, and I had like, a couple of months left on my lease. So I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm gonna make a game. And so I made a game that I wanted to exist. I play a lot of World of Warcraft and RPGs, but I was also getting into a lot of mobile games that were all the rage at that time. But they all had like horrendous monetization, and they kind of like zapped your time, and were not very respectful of users. So I set out to make a game that kind of respected your time, allowed you to play throughout the day and get that sense of progression and enjoyment from these other games that I loved, and without the kind of predatory monetization that many mobile games have. Now, what I didn't realize at the time was that, like, because I'm neurodivergent, a lot of the ways that I designed that game were inherently accessible from a cognitive accessibility perspective. Um, and so I think that was probably the reason, like the spark that was there initially, that when some people from the Apple Viz online forum stumbled across the game, they were like, hey, this is almost fully accessible. Here is some advice on how to make it more accessible. And this came in 2018. I started to get emails like that. And I read them, and I learned about accessibility. I learned about their challenges, and I made changes. And so, like, initially it was just bug fixes, right? Like, I was just like fixing bugs for people. But then I would get this like feedback loop of they would send incredibly heartfelt messages about the difference that I made to their life. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, that wasn't even that hard for me to do. And this is the impact that I had. And so I just became addicted to this like loop of like learning how I can bring games to more people and change their lives through like not a lot of effort. Um, and that's really how I became kind of like fascinated by it. And like, even when I knew at that point I wanted to start Split Atom Labs. It was really just a question of when and how. And so then, like, that's why for all the time I was like doing other stuff, I was still very engaged in the game and in accessibility.
And it's like, people hearing that, I don't think they'll understand the value. So I want to try and put some perspective to that, because I believe I sent you a message along those lines, like,
Yes.
because I found that, like I said, that would have shot myself on March 31st, 2019. If I emailed you in 2020, timeline wise, I I'm trying to think. I got out of blind rehab. You know, this is following relearning how to eat and all that stuff, eat and walk and brush my teeth, and then going to blind rehab and getting the basic training on how to be a blind guy. That I didn't get home, I think, until September of 2019. So it was probably, and I probably found Land of Livia while I was at blind rehab, because they started teaching me how to use a screen reader, and they told me about Apple Viz, and I started going through there to find all these different apps that I might be able to use with my phone. And so I did. At that time, my life when I got home from blind rehab consisted of, so I was living at home with my parents. I had doctor's appointments basically every day. I think I was on 13 different medications when I came home from the hospital. They rebuilt my
Wow.
face. It was just, there's a lot going on. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of mental health stuff on top of relearning how to do literally everything and just then all of the medical complications. And so my life consisted of living at home with my parents. I It's back and forth to the VA each and every day, and then I would work out. The rest of the day was practicing blind guy stuff or listening to podcasts or audiobooks. So, I
Mm-hmm.
it was cooking and having my parents watch me cook to tell, okay, did I these eggs feel done? Are they totally done? Is this ground turkey that I cooked, am I going to get sick from eating this? And it was a lot of that stuff. And I burned stuff and I started a blog so I could try and practice using my computer. But everything was just, even for me to get on the internet and like find a website and be able to navigate to something on Apple Viz, something that would take someone 30 seconds with eyeballs would take me
Mm.
10 minutes to do because it was all,
Yeah.
it's slow process. But find or found Land of Livia and some other games and all it was okay. Cause that's the other side of the internet or any other software that you get is like people probably, or well, I guess I didn't say this when I explained the accessibility thing. The caveat with the accessibility and the access technology that I just described a couple of minutes ago is that most software is not accessible. Most
Yeah.
websites are not accessible. So I had all the basics of these skills and I couldn't get access to even like basic things online. And so, but I could get on my phone and while I was miserable all day, kind of coming to terms with being blind and not actually being able to do anything, I could get on there and play Land of Livia. And it's just this simple little game. Everything worked as it should. It was perfect with voiceover and having access to something without there being hoops to jump through when you're in a position like that, where you're learning how to do everything. And, I'm not saying this to bitch. I'm just trying to give people perspective. I never talk about this, even like when I go on other podcasts with my stories, but when you have a disability like being completely blind, everything takes a lot of extra time and a lot of extra effort. And it shouldn't have to. That's one place where if software is designed properly, it removes any hoop jumping. Land of Livia was that at a time when like everything was painstaking. And that's where these messages come from people. You get people like me where that literally that something as simple as an iPhone game just restores some normalcy to life a little bit, and
Yeah.
it's in the moment where I'm stuck in the car for an hour going to another doctor's appointment or where now, okay, I've done everything that I can for the day. So now I have to lay around and listen to stuff all day. Like, and so it's something that is so simple. And I hope there's some other developer that hears this conversation and is like, no, I'm going to go back to my code base and start doing this because
Yeah.
it can have these huge impacts. And it's so that for you, and I guess when you're receiving those heartfelt messages, did that even register to you that that was like the scope of the impact that you could have? Or were you just like, hey, these people are actually getting something out of this?
No, I just by how they were written, and how frequent they were, I knew that the impact was there and that it was real. I think the part that was challenged with was like, what is the actual scale of it in totality? And that wasn't something that I dug into until late 2022, early 2023. Was like, how much of an actual business could be here? And I think, yeah, I think the numbers are there. Like, I think that people would be surprised with how many millions of people can benefit from accessible software. And how much money there is available, disposable income within that group as well, to actually contribute to the bottom line on a lot of products and services out there.
Like you said, so these, you're getting these messages from people, and because, Land of Livia is an outlier there where it is just accessible and it's this, people are getting value out of that. I've personally done this where I will rally behind a developer that I find that is doing something. I will throw money at that person. I'll do everything that I can to evangelize whatever they're doing because you're like, this person is doing the right thing. And that is, so I think that's another, force multiplier in that market that you're talking about, where if you do the right thing, people will flock to you and prop you up and do everything that they can to help you just because they appreciate that you're doing the right thing. Because at the end of the day, that is what it is. Like, and I think that's where it gets lost in translation with some of these mega companies is when it comes to the bottom line, it costs them extra money up front so that it just gets put to the wayside. But so that brings us through Land of Livia's out. We now know how you got introduced to accessibility and you've had your time at Meta and have decided to go do your own thing with Split Atom. So that brings us to like 2 years ago when you and I talked. And so what's going on now? I know at that point you were getting off the ground and starting to hire people. Like what's going on now?
Yeah, I mean, well, that was the aim. We didn't really hire people in the end. We kept it quite small. So I thought that, okay, I've seen these numbers. I've got this impact from Land Olivia. I have this expertise and professional background. Um, I should go raise some money, and so that I can kind of scale my impact faster. So I went to meet with a lot of game VCs, a lot of traditional VCs, and nobody believes the size of this market and the opportunity, or even the ability to make a game that is like fully accessible. They think that like, oh well, it's going to work for some people, it's not going to work for other people, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, I maintain that they're wrong. We're going to do it anyway. But I wasted a lot of time pitching people and being told no. And so then a change came around, I think it was August last year, when I was accepted into the Access to Success startup accelerator based out of Canada. And this is a disability tech focused accelerator. And so that was a validating moment to like, okay, someone else sees the opportunity here. There was no funding that came with that, but it was, sessions where we could learn from other people. And so I would like join these sessions at like 1 a.m. in the morning, 2 times a week for 3 months. It was pretty intense.
Yeah.
And I, learned from a lot of people in the disability tech sector and a lot of like how to think about the space, how to engage. And it gave me a lot of confidence that like, not only were we on the right direction and that it was meaningful, but like the difficulty we were facing, it was not unexpected, but that didn't mean that we shouldn't keep doing it anyway. And we had cases where people had pushed through that and were successful and did reach the point at which we want to strive for. So that was encouraging. It also gave me a lot of confidence about how to speak about these topics in a respectful and contributing way. I was quite nervous early on of like, how do I talk about disability on podcasts and this sort of thing. So it gave me a lot of confidence there. Then we just went into full build mode. We're like, okay, now we know what we're doing. Let's just keep building. And then we wanted to make Land of Livia even more accessible. And so we worked on a complete redesign of the UI. We ported it all to Swift UI, which you know well, and I think you recommended it to me early on that I should check it out.
Yes.
And that allowed us to do dynamic type, which means adjustable fonts across the whole game for low vision users. And I've not seen a game that supports adjustable font at the degree that we do. We go right up to the top accessibility font size on Apple. We also integrated like a dark UI interface, some voice commands for Siri to like help you do the most common activities in the game, which helps a whole range of people. Often when you introduce an accessibility feature, it's not just one group of people. And the way you think about disability is not just one impairment that people have. Often there are multiple impairments together. And so you really need to think about, how do these accessibility features layer in together to support more people. And then we also integrated some custom haptics that we built to give kind of more feedback to the players. And then at the same time, we also really ramped up the visuals of the game, which is, it was counterintuitive to a lot of people that I spoke to at the time. They're like, but like you're targeting blind and low vision people. Why are you increasing the visuals? It's like, well, we're not just making it for one group of people. We're making a game that happens to be also the most accessible game in the world.
That blows my mind when people don't get that. And that's
Yeah.
even, I've seen other businesses. That was something I set out when I started Dark Horse. Was, yes, this is going to be accessible, but it's going to look and function normally for people who don't have
Yes.
disabilities. because you see these small companies will build like blind crosswords, blind this, blind that,
Mhm.
and you're like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
have a business mind, man. Like you can't for yes, it's awesome that it's accessible, but you by excluding people without disabilities, you're doing yourself a disservice as a business.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. But when people like with you saying that people don't understand that or have such closed-mindedness even as they're speaking to you to not be able to grasp that. I don't that blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we probably invested 50-50 into improving the accessibility and improving, the visual and I would just say like the general game polish and experience. And then we launched that in March of this year. And then we did uh, an influencer, well, a content creator campaign with Molly Burke, who's
Oh, nice.
a prominent blind content creator. She's got like 2 million followers on YouTube,
Yeah.
and so was so excited that she was willing to partner with us on that, and that kind of definitely raised our profile significantly. Um, and then I got the call from Apple that made me audibly gasp that we'd been uh, put up as an Apple Design Award finalist for 2025 for inclusivity. And this was something that Apple Design Awards, I was in the audience at my first WWDC Worldwide Developers Conference at Apple in 2011. And I was lucky enough to see Steve Jobs' what would be his last keynote. And I'm sitting there like seeing these Apple Design Award recipients and just being in awe of like what they were able to achieve, and not even really thinking that like one day I might be able to do that, but just in the back of your head you're like, but maybe one day I could do that. And so like that was just a very special experience to get to that level. And then also I think just a really strong signal to be sent to the industry that like this is an accessible game that can also be an Apple Design Award finalist. I think that's a very special and unique thing. And then I went to WWDC this year and, got a bunch of special treatment there, which was very, very nice after having so many conversations being told no and that like this doesn't make sense, et cetera, et cetera. To get that validation was very rewarding.
And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. And it's actually another great example of like these massive companies. It's weird because on one hand, Apple's accessibility is absolutely at the forefront in terms of consumer
Mhm.
devices, but all of their less publicly facing things don't have the same level of accessibility, nor do they seem to be interested in fixing it. Like as the Apple developer platform, right? Like that is
Mm,
fraught with issues for me, and like I've tried
yeah,
reaching out to
right.
them so many times. Even Xcode has some pretty like big issues. It's mostly good, but like the issues that it does have are big, and there seems to be no willingness to fix it. So it's interesting that they have this big. Yeah, and I think it is one of those things where it is just such a big company, like, it's hard everything's so compartmentalized, like, the messaging just doesn't get to people, but with you even getting entered into the running for that, how did all of that come about?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, so it actually goes back to my time at Two Bulls, because we would build a lot of like cutting edge stuff for upcoming OS releases from Apple, and we would partner with our local developer relations person in Australia. And so I have known him since 2010 probably.
Okay.
And we built things that like got featured. We helped him out with like proving out different use cases for new technology. And we hit it off back then. And so when I started Split Atom Labs, I hit him up and said like, hey, this is like what I'm working on, et cetera, et cetera. But it wasn't actually until later on when I could show the progress that I'd made, and I think also um, the the video from Molly that really contextualized the impact of what we're doing, that got their attention. And then he's been, a very, very strong advocate of what we're doing since then. Um, I think in general, Apple's developer relations is really good at engaging in the grassroots community. At least it is in Australia. And I've seen when I spoke to other recipients from other countries, I think the US is hard, right? Because it's so big. It might be a little bit harder to get attention. But I think they do a pretty good job of that. And yeah, so it kind of went from there. But it is sadly, it is one of those situations where it's the people that yeah, usually the thing that gives you the quote unquote unfair advantage in a business, right? Like it's that network that you can draw on can make a really big difference.
Yeah. And well, that's why I was curious because like obviously kind of naively, right? But when Xanagrams was coming out, I was like, all right, I'm a completely blind dude who's been completely blind for 3.5, 4 years at this point. I taught myself how to code. I created this accessible app. I'm going to reach out to Apple. I never heard a thing. I was like, thought I would at least get a like, hey, it's pretty obvious that a blind guy developed this because it's ugly. So we're not going to like, even we can't consider
Yeah.
it or something. But so yeah, it's
I'm surprised that you haven't been able to connect through to like their student program type stuff when like I don't know what the qualifying like criteria is, but they're very supportive, like people learning the platform and kind of growing with it. And I met a bunch of great people from that program when I was over in at the conference. And that seemed to be very, diverse and inclusive. So maybe I do think like it is a big company, so maybe it's just haven't your messages haven't gotten through to the right people. The App Store like featuring process is like that's the most competitive, right? Like that's everyone is doing that. I think the chance like and I did that as well, and it wasn't and we got ignored. So it wasn't until I actually had the direct connection that like
yeah.
it made a difference.
No, that's badass though, dude. So do you find out or did you find out live while you were in San Francisco who actually won? Is that when they reveal all that stuff?
No, the winners had already been like decided when I was told I was a finalist, but I wasn't a winner.
Okay.
But yeah, in my mind, like both are equally exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I looked on the page. I think there were three in your category.
Hmm.
Like that's
Yep.
just out of the what tens of
Tens of
millions of
thousands.
apps,
Yeah, I
like
mean, I
of
think,
apps that are on there.
yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just insane. Either whatever the number is, that is freaking impressive, man. And it just, I think, especially because it's been a long time coming, right? Like this has been a decade
Yeah.
long project, and it's so cool, and I'm happy for you, and that especially it's neat that it came after you had started Split Atom Labs, so
Hmm.
it's not the first iteration of everything. It's kind of getting momentum behind what you're trying to do because I think it someone again, someone trying to do the right thing. I'm all for it. It deserves having that momentum behind it. So I love that, and it's
So
go
So
for
that's
it.
the positive side. Like I will like deviate surely to say like, some of the challenges because I think it's important for people to understand is like
Yes.
even though we've gotten to that level now, that level of credibility, that level of reputation, and it obviously had a positive effect on our business. Um, I have like gone on from that and done a bunch of podcasts like this and a bunch of like chats with people, but they've all been accessibility or disability focused people or forums. I've really struggled to get any traction from the mainstream media. And I just think that's absurd. Like, the impact of what we're doing and the progress that we've made, especially, when you look at like Australia where I'm based, like it's a small country. Like, we were the only company that went up for this design award finalist. Yet, like, we got like one article out that I really had to push for, but it was very focused on like the gaming aspect and less on like, the impact of the business.
And
Um, yeah, it's hard.
yeah. Well, accessibility is not a sexy thing, right? And
Yes.
it's not a buzzword thing, right? Like I noticed one of the finalists, and this is, this, I'm not trying to get political here. One of the finalists in, I think, the inclusiveness category for the Apple Design Awards was a, it was I can't remember if it was a workout app specifically or like a software. It was some sort of coaching, right? But it was tailored for the LGBTQ plus community. Like
Yeah.
that's because that is a more present issue right now and a more of a valuable buzzword these days. I think that is why
Yeah.
something like that got included in there. Because yes, people from that community need software, but that doesn't having something like Land of Livia that is leveraging technologies that bring blind people access to the world and people, like I said, who have spinal cord injuries or who are missing limbs. that objectively has more of an impact, right? That is doing more. And I think that's probably, had you had some other categories applied to your app that are more popular buzzwords and that would circulate better in the media, I think that probably would have been a little different.
Yeah, it's interesting. One aspect is the neurodivergency angle, like that is also very much more popular in the media and on social media. For whatever reason, it just seems to spread better. And like we've avoided, even though our game
Mm.
is quite accessible from that perspective, we've avoided leaning into that marketing message because like we have less of a competitive advantage, at least right now. And we just, want to stay focused on like, the blind and low vision community is like where we really know we can win. But yeah, it's been challenging. I'm still not quite sure um, why it's so difficult to get traction on those types of stories and an understanding of like why it's important. I mean, I still get like, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, is like even when I say that I'm building games for people who are blind, I just get like a lot of confused stares. Like people don't understand like why that's even something that's a thing.
Yeah, and I think it's also partially, not partially. I mean, it is less tangible because unless you see Molly Burke navigating Land of Livia with the screen reader, like you're not understanding even or whatever, whoever using some sort of access technology where someone can also visually see the screen and see how that access technology is interfacing with the UI just like they would, just without them tapping on it like they normally would. I think, again, if you're that person trying to wrap that into an article or someone who's not from the tech space trying to promote that, like how how do I even go about that? And but it is an uphill battle, but I think, this is I'm obviously not a mainstream media source, but this is also not a disability podcast or anything like that. So hopefully there's, again, I think
Love it. Yeah.
someone will hopefully hear this that wouldn't normally hear it and maybe go investigate and send some people your way. But what else is on the horizon for you guys? Are you still kind of transforming Land of Livia? Are you working on anything else that you're ready to announce in the background? What's going on there?
So we have three major priorities that we're working on at the moment. One is to update to iOS 26. Apple's biggest UI update, I think, for a very long time, and quite a bit of changes in there. And also, we're exploring getting a widget onto Vision OS. So even though the number of users on Apple Vision Pro is low, so I don't think this is going to be like a big growth thing for us. But I think it's important to like plant the flag because I really feel that the use case of games on wearables is super strong. I mean, that's what I did at Meta, and I know a lot about it. And I think Apple Vision Pro is a tremendous device. They let me come up to Sydney to try one the other week,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
run the game on it. And I'm like, yeah, I need to do this. This is like even I just need to do this from like my own perspective of like I think this is super cool, so I need to build it. And so we're going to optimize it for Vision Pro. There's going to be a widget that you can have like a painting on your wall of like where you are in the game,
Like
which
the
and
map
like allow
is,
you to like, yeah,
oh,
yeah,
wow.
and allow you to like easily jump back into like wherever you are in the game, like while you're drinking your coffee or while you're taking a break from watching a movie or whatever. So I think that's super cool. Um, we're also experimenting with some generative AI stuff from Image Playground on the Apple APIs, and then we're also implementing a bunch of quality of life stuff. Like, the game is growing significantly. There's people asking for like how the campfire chat can be, which is where people can socially talk, have a little bit more built out functionality. Continuing to streamline the game. We're always kind of doing that. But then really the exciting thing is that we want to add some more interactivity to the game. So, the majority of the game is played through in an idle way. Like you do a quest, you come back later and you get your rewards. We want to add a new mini game in there that is much more interactive, kind of think card and dice game, but with our own unique spin on it. And so that's something that we're working on, and we think that that will increase the number of like people that might be willing to give the game a go. I think some people like the idle timers is a little bit of a turnoff. So that's going to be our first, step into adding new gameplay for the longest time in the game. And then, beyond that, like next year, we're thinking, a lot of people ask for Android. So like getting it out on Android would be a cool thing, but it's a pretty big development lift. And then localization, we get people from all countries like asking, can this be localized? So that's also something we're interested in. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, gosh, dude. So I guess I think we'll attack the simpler one first here. So just for people listening, localization is basically so you can make the app be translated into different languages. But with that, I started looking into that recently, just with my current project, and that's in React Native. But just gosh, dude, the lift on something, especially this app is not a game, so it's like
Mhm.
there's a lot of copy in the UI, and it's like it seems like it's going to be a nightmare. But Land of Livia, because it is a massive game, also has an
Yeah.
incredible amount of text. So like that's going
It's 50,000 words. Yeah.
okay. Oh, so are you just going to hire bilingual speakers of, if you want a localized to Spanish, hire a native Spanish speaker who also speaks English to transcribe
The,
all
the,
of it?
there are companies that like provide it as a service, and I think that we'd probably, to keep costs down, find a company that leverages a mixture of like individual expertise and AI to keep it down. But like it's tens of thousands of dollars that we're talking about in terms of like localization costs.
Yeah, that's no joke. But if you start with like Spanish, obviously
Hmm.
spoken like everywhere in the world, I would think that would hopefully start to pay itself off a little bit. But
Yeah.
if in terms of going cross-platform, I guess, are you thinking React Native, importing the entire code base, or what?
Yeah, good question. So I think we want to be able to provide like the native experience on each platform. So whatever cross-platform technology or approach we take, we want to be able to tweak natively on each platform. From both a experience perspective, I think part of the good thing about the game is it's easy to pick up and play for people that already know the platform, because it's more familiar. It's not like everything's custom built for a game, which is what usually happens. And then also, like in terms of using accessibility features, you need that native support to really do the best job. So we're looking at what is it, Kotlin multi-platform, I think,
Yes.
which would be rebuilding it in Kotlin and then using that on iOS. That's one option. The other option is that we build like a library layer that is cross-platform, either in Kotlin or Swift, that can compile on each platform and then build the UI again. I think it's very unlikely that we would use a cross-platform UI framework, because I just think it would just be too challenging and we wouldn't be able to get the level of polish that we want. But that means that like the cost is definitely much higher than other developers pay, and so I think people sometimes struggle to understand, like, why can't you just release it on Android? It's like, well, unfortunately, it's not that simple.
Well, the code doesn't just equally translate into another language either. It's,
No.
or the state management system, even that's, I was going to warn you about with React Native is that the accessibility on there actually, like out of the box, isn't that great.
Yeah.
It's very low level, and you have to build a lot of custom stuff in, but you can drop down to OS specific components if you need to. But I don't know what kind of crazy custom components you guys have built in Swift UI right now, but it might be a bit like an even heavier lift than necessary to go to
Yeah.
React Native. That kind of caught me off guard, to be honest, when I switched over. But
Boo.
it's I have I guess, are your other developers familiar with those frameworks, or is it something you guys are all going to learn on the fly? What's the plan there if you do
Yeah,
that?
learn on the fly. Like that's
Okay.
generally what I've done throughout. my career is like just work with smart people, and then the people that are adaptable to like learn new things. But like I do still do everything myself. Like I have a developer that helps out maybe 12 hours a week, but everything else is still just me at this point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize that because we'd we'd talked about kind of what you were looking to do before, so I wasn't sure how things had actually panned out. But in terms of
Hmm.
the hiring thing, which you kind of commented on
Yeah, yeah,
earlier,
yeah.
but man, so where outside of searching for Land of Livia, which in Livia is Livia in the Apple App Store, where else can people find you and Split Atom Labs?
Yeah. So I think the easiest way is probably just splitatomlabs.com. You can obviously learn more about what we're doing, but there's a get involved section where there's a link to our mailing list, Discord, our social media, and obviously there's a link to the game to download as well. I think definitely if anything today has sparked interest, I'd recommend coming to join our Discord. It's been growing pretty steadily, and I think we have great conversations in there about how to build a game that balances mainstream applicability and accessibility. And we have a great mixture of people that it's very diverse and inclusive in there. So it's a great place to come hang out.
Awesome, man. Do you have anything else you want to throw out there before we wrap this up?
Uh, no, just yeah. Thank you very much for the great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and for wrangling your kids for the 30 seconds you had to go do that. But I'm so glad we were able to do this, and thank you for taking the time for this. But again, just getting out there and doing things, building things the right way. I do
Mhm.
appreciate it. So,
Thank you, man.
and thanks everyone at home for listening to another episode of Going In Blind. Remember, my book is on the way, so head to my website at zachtidwell.com to join the mailing list and get updates about that and also deals when it's going to be released. Also, remember to rate and review the show wherever you listen, and then share this episode around with someone who needs to hear it. There was a lot to extract out of this, whether you're someone who just enjoys technology, if you know a developer, or if you know someone with a disability. So share it around. We'll see you next time.